So why is a broadcaster with a big linear heritage and that's traditionally sold itself on mass reach worrying about outcomes? Mainly that outcomes have won in the marketplace. I did a calculation for the UK media spend and sort of recut it on denominator of contract, so whether you're buying eyeballs or whether you're buying outcomes, and more than half the money, I mean since 2019, more than half the money has been spent on outcomes. So outcomes have won, and also telly is great at measuring, is great at causing them. You know, it causes huge impacts. It's just that historically we haven't had to measure those. You know, the whole reach promise has been enough. But in the context of the market as it is today, we feel that we owe it to the medium in a way to give it the measurement it deserves.
It's not something, I guess, that could have been done on ITV in the past, but now you have your ITVX platform. But what outcomes can be achieved and who's buying them?
So in terms of the outcomes that can be achieved, I mean, we tend to measure a whole range. So we'll measure everything from brand to site lift to footfall to sales, and also to things like price elasticity and margin. So we try and cover the whole gamut of business effects. And also unusually, normally a measurement person will say to you, pick the one KPI you care about and focus on that. Whereas we tend to say, okay, no, we will look at the range of effects because TV impacts all of those things. And then the twist is that we also look for the impact of TV on other channels. So with OMG, we've done this study of about 30 advertisers where we've got all of their historical Google ads data. So literally the costs of the clicks that they're buying, the ranking that they get and so on. And then we've crashed all of their historical TV spend into that. And you see some fascinating relationships. And so in some cases, we've been able to show that being on air gets you better position in the Google auction and gets you cheaper clicks. And so, those sorts of interactions have historically just not been studied. Now, in terms of who's buying those outcomes, we don't sell on outcome. We still sell very much in the traditional way that we've traded. And obviously the UK market is very different from the US in terms of, we don't have an upfronts piece. We have a peculiar mechanism called station average price, but it works as a mechanism. So we don't sell on an outcome basis, but what we're trying to do now is comprehensively measure the outcomes for more and more of our campaigns. And so that way, at least there's evidence that goes back into the advertiser to say, look, yes, we've got what our Google spend did or our Meta spend did, and here's what our telly spend did in a comparable way.
And it's telling that you are quantifying outcomes yourself, and as opposed to just leaving it to an agency or a modeling provider. What prompted the move to do it yourself?
It's a really interesting question. Why are we doing all of this ourselves? We could have waited for the market to solve the problem for us. And actually, you could even argue that it's stupid for us to do it ourselves because initially, at least, people will be predisposed to suspicion. They'll look at our stuff and go, well, you would say that it's effective, wouldn't you? I think the honest answer, though, is that it's only us that could, for a number of reasons. So there's partly technical reasons. So like when we're doing our geo experiments, we're the only ones that have the really detailed, messy data on our regional footprint. And, whether you receive the correct regional flavour of ITV depends on whether you're watching HD or SD. And so all of that stuff is not known to the market. So we're the ones who are best placed to take that into account. In terms of our pricing stuff, we had to go and buy data for multiple categories. And you buy the whole category, not just one brand. Whereas if you're a brand, you would just do the econometric model for your data. And so that's an example of where it could only be us that did it, really. And then where it can't be asked by ourselves, we've teamed up with the other broadcasters. So a few months ago, we launched this thing called Project Lantern, which is a collaboration between all the UK broadcasters to measure individual level online outcomes by connecting them to the data that we already have sitting in our data centers, which is the ad exposures. So if those things are already there, you haven't got, in the old research world, there was this thing called a single source panel, and they were cursed because you could never make them big enough and they were far too expensive and they all died. Whereas we've avoided the curse of the single source panel because we're just taking data that's already there. Your telly at home is probably, if not smart, at least not particularly dumb. And it can be persuaded to tell us the viewing and therefore the ad exposures. And so if we can link that to the online behaviours and do it at a broadcaster level, because really we're talking about the medium here, not about ITV, then we can measure the impact even without needing data from the advertiser. So those are a few ways, I think, in which we as a broadcaster group and also ITV individually can do this stuff, because it's not something that the research industry could do for us. I mean, I went to the ASI conference, which is mostly the eyeball measurement industry. And I've been 2 years on the trot now, and I'm trying to sort of encourage them to think about outcomes. And they're all sat there going, yeah, but we make lots of money from eyeball measurement and it's kind of fine. And whereas the Lantern POC will be as big as Barb. And that's just the POC, that's only the little toy one that we're building before we get to the big one. But yeah.
And just finally, if you spin forward 5 years, where does innovation on measurement take us? What will measurement of TV look like in 5 years?
In 5 years, if we get all of our builds done and if we get the coordination across the industry to happen, I think we'll see a world where, in terms of the outcome measures, it's at least a fair conversation. And we can talk about all the different media channels in terms of the lift that they can create in different business metrics in a reasonably neutral way. People moan about the platforms and go, oh, they're marking their own homework. I know the people that build a lot of those products. They are scrupulously careful. Yes, they make mistakes, but we all do. But at least 5 years from now, we'll have got to a point where it's a fair contest, and then let the most influential medium win.